In this video segment, we're going to review the process of replacing our Grundfos flow sensor, flow and temperature sensor, as well as our pressure and temperature sensor, should you have experienced the installation procedures of Bub Gibson. He showed up, did it his way, didn't follow any proper procedures, didn't reach out for any help, just kind of cowboyed it up all over the place. You all know who I'm talking about. So in our V-Flow with iGate Connect and EXM, this will be the procedure. Now in this video, we're going to show the work. I'm going to attempt the work to go through the service and access door, but for the video we're going to have the side door removed so that you can see what's transpiring. Ideally you want to have some room over here off to the side so you can get the side panel off, because life's just a whole lot easier. So again, on these units, if you'll give yourself some working room, if at all possible, over here on this side, life's just so much easier for you. So I'm going to show you the procedure. You can do this without the need of a flush card, actually. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about if you blew out the flow and temperature sensor here. So again, this is the inline flow meter. It's located just below the Magnum pump here in our V-Flow with iGate Connect and our EXM board. This again is only flow and entering water temperature. If you put too much pressure to it and pop that membrane, you have to replace this sensor. We're going to show you how that's done. Up here is our leaving water temperature as well as the loop pressure sensor. And every now and again we've seen just a couple of those where they've given us some false readings. So we're going to go through the procedures that it takes to replace both of those. Let me show you the differences. They appear similar, but in fact they are not. They are not interchangeable either. So we'll hold this up so that you can get a close-up view of them. So the difference is explained. Over here we have the VFD, that is the flow and temperature sensor. It's going to have the two O-rings on it, and you want to make sure you moisten those O-rings. I know some have tried a little light coating of silicone grease. I have found personally that actually water works a little bit better. So again, that is the flow and temperature sensor that goes into that flow meter body, located below the Magnum pump. Now we have our DPD sensor. So again, this is our loop pressure and leaving water temperature sensor, and it is similar in appearance, but it is different in practice. They are not, as again I mentioned, interchangeable. So this one actually has a rubber boot, and this rubber boot has a keyway. I'll turn it on its end here. Hopefully you can see that fairly well. And then I'll turn it this way. So it has a very specific orientation, and you must make sure that when we install that rubber boot is located in place and you moisten it real well with water. We've tried this with silicone grease. We found it works far better with water. So in this application, we're going to show you that procedure. So we're going to go ahead and do this work. Again, I will attempt it from the door, assuming you can't get the side off. We'll see how that works for us. So the first thing you want to do is you want to install some kind of boiler drain with some short hoses so that you can just isolate the loop. You're going to rotate our flushing valves in here so that the pressure is retained in your ground loop, but open to this valve is just the heat pump side. So similar to when you were going to flush just the unit, that's the orientation you put both valves in. Have yourself a bucket so you can capture the fluid. So we're just going to knock the pressure down inside the heat pump. We don't have to take the entire loop down because we're just doing some work in here on the loop side. So again, we have the ability with the V-Flow only. Can you come in here and isolate that loop, knock down the pressure here inside the heat pump, and get after some of these replacement components. Because there might be a situation where you'll have to remove the expansion tank, I'm going to leave that valve open, so when I bleed the pressure off the unit, I'm also discharging that fluid volume that we've got up against that bladder in that expansion tank. So if we need to remove the pump, which is what I'm going to do, again, it's just going to be that ECM power head. Now, reaching in this box, guys, I've had the power off to this particular model. This is a Trilogy unit, and the power's been off for over 20 minutes, making sure that we have full discharge of our inductor and our capacitors. Again, safety first. You won't like the bite you get by shortcutting that. So again, we're working inside the cabinet here. We're working on the fluid side. Make sure that power has been off for a good solid 20 minutes before you attempt any of this. So I'm going to pop the end cover, the electrical plate, off that Grundfos Magna pump, exposing the two number 25 Torx screws. I have a little close approach ratchet wrench here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove those two screws. Now bear in mind, guys, I haven't taken the pressure down on this unit, but yet I'm taking the screws out of the power head of this pump. Well, guess what? By doing that, I'm not breaching the integrity of the water circuit. All I'm doing is similar to how you would remove a module off an ECM blower motor. It's the same thing I'm doing on this pump. So again, with the power being off for a solid 25 minutes and more here, once I have those two screws backed out, not even removed, now I can pop that ECM module off. Again, I have not got into the water side, and now I've opened up an awful lot more room. So I can get back here to our pressure and temperature sensor. If need be, if I need more room, I can actually remove that expansion tank. But again, I'm not going to pop this retaining clip because I'm still under pressure. So let's walk through this procedure. So we have put in a couple of boiler drains. We have a bucket here, a clean bucket, in order to capture our fluid. Best that you wear some safety goggles if you have any kind of antifreeze. This is just pure water here in our lab, but again, if this is an antifreeze solution, you want to make sure you're wearing some safety glasses. Now again, I'm going to rotate these valves so that I am isolating the ground loop and I am opening up to our flush ports here, the unit side, and I'm going to take that pressure off on the water out, and I'm going to capture it in a bucket. This hose over here is actually city water pressure, and that's what we're going to use at the end of this segment to just slowly burp just the heat pump. We don't have to burp the ground loop because we didn't compromise that, we isolated it. So I'm going to go ahead and orient these valves so that I isolate that ground loop. So I've now oriented it so that my loop is isolated, and I'm open now to the heat pump. I'm going to go ahead and take that pressure off the interior of the heat pump. Again, because I may have to take out that expansion tank, I've left that valve open so I can also displace the fluid that is captive in there. Again, it's not a lot of fluid, but give it a few moments. Make sure that you've drained that pressure out. Make less of a mess when you pull these clips to replace these sensors. So it looks like we've got the bulk of the fluid, or at least the pressure, moved out of the system there into our captive bucket. But one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to depress our Schrader fitting here at the expansion tank. That'll allow some air in, and sure enough, we're getting more water, so we're ventilating it. Again, just so that we can kind of control the mess to a large degree. All right. It looks like we've gotten all the fluid out of there that it's going to give us, having this ventilated. I'm going to go ahead and put the cap back on just so I don't misplace it. Then I've made myself an access down through this unit. I'm going to reach down here and I'm going to find the Molex plug that goes to the pressure and temperature sensor. And I'm going to depress it and disconnect it. Now I'm going to try a couple of different tools here, see which one works best, because I need to remove this clip. You can see how much easier it would be having access to the side here. There's a retaining clip. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set a rag in here so if we have a little bit of fluid in there, which we probably do, we'll kind of control the mess to some degree. I'm going to gently rock it up and down, twist it just a little bit, not much, guys. I know it's the old sensor, but now one of the things you'll probably find is that rubber boot that I showed you earlier in the video, it remained inside the fitting. Usually it's best to remove that rubber boot and then go with the new one on the new sensor. But one of the things you're also going to need is I'm going to need to remove the Grundfos connector. It's got a little bit of a retaining clip. Typically a short flat blade screwdriver works best to do that. One on each side. It's important to make sure that you keep those connections watertight. Getting moisture around those connections will give you some poor readings and have the EXN board make poor control decisions based upon bad readings. So now I need to reach in there and remove that rubber boot. I'm probably going to need a small screwdriver to do that. There we go. Now again, I want to point out the keyway on the rubber boot. It's important that it goes in the exact same way. So again, this one was to the right of that cabinet door, the access door, so it's to my right. So now I'm going to take the replacement sensor. It comes with the rubber boot. I'm going to make sure it's properly seated. And I'm going to make sure that I have my keyway over to the right, again, as I'm facing the door. And it's also, your connection should be on the top. So when this is inserted into place, your Grundfos connector is on the very top. And again, making sure you don't get any moisture around that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make that connection at this point in time. Making sure it latches down properly. Give it just a gentle tug test to make sure you have it there appropriately. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to moisten this liberally and reinsert it. This is the part that I see some guys get into a little bit of difficulty. So I'm going to line it up. I'm going to just apply some steady pressure. You do have to kind of rock just gently, ever so much, a little bit, and a little bit back and forth, not a lot, so that it's fully seated before you attempt to put in the keeper key, retainer clip. Let me try my other hand here. If you get too vigorous, guys, you could actually damage or break off that sensor end. Well, I'm pretty confident that I've got that firmly seated in place, so now it's time to install the retaining clip. Okay. And guys, don't forget to plug in that Molex connector again. Do a little pull test on that gently. Not to dislodge the wire, just make sure it is firmly seated. And again, that connection is dry. I did double check that. Now I'm ready to work on the VFD sensor, which is the temperature and flow sensor. So again, I'm going to start off by disconnecting that Molex plug. Now we have that disconnected. Guys, when you install these units, you're going to need to have at least a minimum amount of space. More is certainly better, so that you can get your hand down here to remove that clip. So you're going to have at least that as a minimum, obviously, to pull this door, put it back on, get those screws in, but also get your arm and hand back here. So we're going to go ahead and remove that clip. I've retained the clip. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that sensor. Again, best if you have that room off to the side here. Notice I'm gently wiggling that up and out. And similarly, I'm going to take a small screwdriver and I'm going to remove that Grundfos connector. Again, this is going to be in our V-Flow with iGate Connect and EXM product line, not just the Trilogy product line. Take a quick glance, guys, to make sure you haven't got any moisture in that connection. Here's our new sensor. Again, we're going to verify that it's got a good connection here, and that the clips have reseated. I'm going to do again another little gentle pull test. Now again, we've got a couple of O-rings here. You want to make sure that you have two O-rings that you removed. You can see one of them's damaged, the other one's not there. What does that tell us? It tells us there's still an O-ring and it's probably inside that seat of that waterway, so we're going to go ahead and see about getting that out of there. Again, works best if you have that room available here. There's the O-ring. We'll discard that. Now again, we're going to moisten the O-rings liberally, and we're going to reinsert the new sensor. Again, making sure that our connector is in the position that it was before. And then we're ready to reinsert our clip. Okay, there we go. We've got that sensor in firmly. Don't forget again to make your Molex plug connection. And do a gentle pull test to make sure that connection's there in good shape. So, last step. We've replaced our sensor, but we've introduced a little bit of air into the system. It's not likely there's a big pocket of air behind that flow sensor, but I'm always going to err on the side of being very conservative and safe because I don't want to keep doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to burp the system, but because I've retained the loop pressure and didn't compromise that, I isolated it. All I need to do is just gently and slowly flood and then burp just the unit side, pressurize it, pressurize the expansion tank, and then I can go live with the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to modulate this close just a little bit. Again, this is my water out. This hose over here has city water pressure on it, so I'm going to slowly open that. Before I do that, I'm going to close my expansion tank valve handle. That's now closed, so I'm going to go ahead and slowly open my water. Now I'm going to close my entering water pressure here, but the end of my hose on my outlet, my water out, is under the water level, so I shouldn't bring any air in. One point that I want to address here, guys, it's really important that you want to test and validate the household water pressure, because again, the speed limit on our sensors is 100 psi. Most homes won't have anywhere near that. However, you never know. You might find that home that has that exceedingly high pressure. You don't want to damage the sensor. So again, take that precaution, validate that water pressure coming into the house so you know what you're dealing with here. So I'm going to go ahead and start this back up again. Just wanted to make that cautionary note. And I'm pretty confident that we have the air out of there. Give it some volume here. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to isolate my water outlet and provide some pressure onto that system. Again, this is domestic water. Not a lot of fluid in there. I mentioned earlier we didn't get much fluid out, so you haven't really diluted your antifreeze content to any real degree. But one of the steps we need to take here, we need to again pressurize our expansion tank, but we also need to burp that pipe coming in. So I'm going to remove that Schrader cap, utilize the rag here. I'm going to make sure that we have fluid right to that point, which we do. Clean up the mess a little bit. Now the next step, I'm going to open the expansion tank valve and put some charge into that expansion tank against that bladder. So it gives us a little bit of drawdown capacity. So my outlet is closed. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate the valves into the service position. So it'll close off here and here and open it up to the loop. And now my last and final step, besides disconnecting my water hoses here, don't forget to shut off your water pressure before you do such things. My last and final step will be to reinstall the Magna ECM module. Again, it's lining it up, fitting it in place, tightening up those two number 25 Torx bits, putting that cover back on, and you're ready to go live with this unit again. So guys, that's some of the procedures you want to follow to again address replacement of sensors. Again, if Bubba Gibson showed up and compromised those sensors, this can be a fairly easy and painless way without dragging the flush cart, hoses, and all that apparatus in. Have a couple of hoses, have the ability to get from that 1-inch flush port to some kind of a boiler drain and control assembly, both on the outlet and on the inlet.